Hi, everyone. I want to wander a little bit into a minefield that is the topic that was put recently to a couple of the leading political candidates, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And I'm sure they probably didn't want to answer these questions. It's a bit of a touchy subject, of course. But mostly I want to focus a little bit on the response, the reaction by the public at large, by a lot of political pundits and news agencies and that sort of thing, to what I see as a bit of an irrational response. Now, when I go through my video catalog, I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record. When I watch some of my own videos, I talk about rationality and empiricism all the time. I think they're key, though, and there's a reason behind that. Now, normally what I'm talking about, I'm referring to the attempt to invoke religious law into secular societies. And I've often made the case, whether it's Christianity or Islam or any other religion, if you're going to suggest that the other people in your population should have to submit to laws that are essentially brought down through your religious texts, that you should be able to demonstrate that your religious text represents an accurate reflection, an accurate explanation of the nature of our existence. And if you can't do that, I think we're going to have to ask you to step aside when it comes to enforcing laws and codes of conduct on other people. You've got to be able to make a rational and empirical argument for these things. And I can't harp on this enough. This also comes up when we talk about secular morality, objective or subjective, et cetera, et cetera. And the question, of course, that was put to the political candidates was regarding abortion. And the responses from people, I don't think that their answers to the questions were all that big of a deal, knowing the ideological position of both candidates. Of course, Hillary Clinton would be more along the sort of feminist line, who would suggest that a woman has a right to choose. And Donald Trump would be more along the religious right, who would say that, abortion is abhorrent and should be outlawed. And that should be a surprise to no one, I think. So, they maintain their political ideologies. I may make a video expressing my position because I don't really support either of those two positions. I am a secular pro-life person. And so even when it comes to Donald Trump or any other Republican candidate who may be promoting the pro-life banner, I can't buy into it for their reasoning. Their rationale behind being pro-life, I can't support because, of course, it comes with a lot of baggage that I am not going to support. I can't buy the whole pig, right? But again, it's not a surprise how either of them answered, but the response, I think, is very interesting. So when it comes to a lot of people on the far, I guess you might call it the far left, Hillary Clinton's otherwise seemingly innocuous response, at least in terms of the typical platform of a Democratic candidate, was seen by people on the very far left as being inappropriate in that it humanized the human fetus. And they don't like that. Now, this was also a response by a lot of lefty-leaning feminists recently, maybe more radical feminists, you might say, over, I think it was a Doritos commercial, like a Super Bowl ad where, this baby came, I guess, shooting out of the womb in an attempt to get a chip, I guess. That's how good they are. And they didn't like that either because it humanized the fetus. And they didn't like Hillary Clinton's language because it humanized the fetus. And I find that to be, if not irrational, it's indicative of some sophistry. It's indicative of some disingenuous language that people are using. And of course they have a need to do this because if a fetus is a human person and deemed to have the rights of a human person, then obviously to terminate the pregnancy would be an offense. And so they've got to find a way, of course, to make sure that this is not seen as a human person with all the inalienable rights that would be bestowed upon such a person. And so they go as far as they can to even not want to humanize the fetus. And that's a little bit disingenuous. It's not an arachnid, right? It's clearly a human unborn child, fetus, if you like. And like I said, I might go into my secular pro-life position sometime in the future. You might be surprised at some of my reasoning behind it. But I find that quite disingenuous to get all kinds of bent out of shape at Hillary Clinton for humanizing a human fetus. Donald Trump, the question was put to him by Chris Matthews, and I think I'm not sure why he would go on Chris Matthews' show. I don't think he's going to get a sympathetic audience or a sympathetic treatment by Chris Matthews, who's fairly left leaning in his ideology. But the question was put to him: if you were to overturn Roe v. Wade, if you were to outlaw abortion, would you punish mothers who seek an abortion, who get an abortion? The answer to that question should surprise no one. And the pundits and the people in the different news agencies, I guess I can understand their manipulation of this to try to demonize Donald Trump, that he wants to punish mothers who seek an abortion. But it would stand to demonize him no more than it would any other Republican candidate now and forever. And again, I can see the pundits and those people trying to use this as a manipulation against Donald Trump. I understand that. What I'm more interested in is a response by the public at large, because a lot of people have reacted very vehemently against this idea, as though it's somehow uniquely Trump and it demonstrates a unique flaw in his character, etc., etc. But really, he's just the guy who was asked the question. And the irrationality here, as I see it, is a bit of a disconnect, like a cognitive disconnect between people and the idea of what government really is and what laws really are, right? Laws and government are basically a threat of force for compliance. And that's just what they are. Certainly all federal laws. If you don't comply, at some point you're going to be either forced to comply, or if you're able to resist long enough, you'll be put down. That's what laws are. The interesting thing is, as a kind of a armchair anarchist, I've gotten into discussions with people before who will say these arguments that the government represents the initiation of the use of force, that all laws are backed by a gun, and ultimately, if you resist laws, you will either be incarcerated against your will or killed. And they say that's not really what's going on. That's not the case. That's not what government really is. But if you attempt to make an argument for a stateless society, these self-same people will talk about how if there isn't an agency with the ability to initiate force against someone for nonconformity, that it won't work. It will just devolve into chaos. So they're making the case for that which they say is not really the nature of government in the first place as being necessary. But I think that there is, amongst the general populace, a bit of a cognitive disconnect when it comes to what government actually represents and what laws really are. And that's evidenced, I think, by some of the responses to Donald Trump stating the obvious. I don't see a point in having a law that if you're going to have a state and you're going to have laws which are basically the threat of the use of force against you for not conforming, I don't see what the point would be in having a law that has no teeth. What is it, a suggestion at that point? Certainly, of course, making the assumption, for argument's sake, I'm not making my case right now, so please open your mind, expand your horizons for just a second, and just entertain the thought in your mind for the moment that a fetus has rights, okay? And so if it's an offense to terminate a pregnancy, that the mother would be held legally responsible for that, as well as the physician who carried it out. This is not really much different, I don't think, than a woman who hires a hit on her husband. She's guilty of a crime also. And it's funny that people can't make that connection. Now, again, I'm not arguing for that position right now. What I'm talking about here is the cognitive dissonance, this disconnect that people have from what laws actually mean. Should someone even have to ask the question, if we make something illegal, are we going to hold the people who enact that illegal thing, are we going to hold them responsible? Well, duh. That's what a law is. And it's just interesting to me that people are so irrational when it comes to this question. Now, I think most of it is because they've got so much of their emotions tied up in the in the issue of abortion, and I understand that. I can get emotional about the subject as well. And I think, generally speaking, most of us have good intentions behind our position. Obviously, there's probably a right answer somewhere, and that would mean that some of us are wrong. But we're probably not malevolent in our wrong position. I think very few people are, especially people who try to make an impassioned case for their position. They're probably not malevolent, because I think real sociopaths don't waste a lot of time trying to plead their case to other people and trying to back up and give evidence for why they believe a certain thing. But it just strikes me as funny that this has become such a huge mark against Trump, as though it's any different from any other Republican's platform, and as though it doesn't represent the obvious logistical ramifications of having something be against the law. Let me know what you think. As always, thanks for watching.